started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this wonderful presentation. It's going to be about 50 minutes. My name is Katrina Schlicker. I'm the Environmental Education Coordinator with Wild Rivers Conservancy. I'll be in the background moderating the chat, helping out with any technical difficulties, keeping them at bay so we don't have to worry about them for this section. Few housekeeping things. There's at the bottom of your screen both a chat and a Q&A function. If you have any questions throughout the entirety of this presentation, go ahead and put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end. But if there's something that's happening and you can't hear very well, or maybe maybe you need to say something because something isn't working, go ahead and put that in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on both of those. Just so you know, the session is being recorded. It will be made permanently available on the Wild Rivers Conservancy YouTube account. And with all of that out of the way, I would love to introduce our speaker and give the rest of the time to them. So please welcome Charlie Mitchell.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I will be talking today about Season Watch, which is all about phenology in the classroom, on the radio, and of course on the St. Croix River. Um, this is all thanks to two things: the organization I work for, which is Northern Community Radio, KAXE, which is based up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, which is through the state of Minnesota. So here's me, age probably about 3. I grew up here on the St. Croix River, just a little bit north of Marine on St. Croix, and I got to spend most of my childhood as like a little human raccoon running around, looking at nature, checking what was underneath logs and stuff. And I grew a real love for this area and for the creatures in it. In college, and in graduate school, I got to study biology. I worked with turtles. This little river pancake here is a soft-shell turtle. They're really interesting, and we do have them on the St. Croix. Um, so I got to, study biology through college and graduate school. And then in a turn I did not expect, I ended up working for a radio station. This is me after I heard a sora, which is a kind of like river chicken bird, call for the first time. I did not really see myself working for a radio station. I prefer to be behind the scenes whenever possible, but this has turned out to be a really great turn for me. And so you might be wondering the same thing that I was wondering when I applied for this job, which is what is phenology? Um, and there is a long, complicated answer. So, phenology is the rhythmic, biological nature of events as they relate to climate. Now, I find that one pretty confusing, so let's talk about it a different way. Phenology is essentially looking at nature's clock. So, at one time of year, things look very different from another. These are two pictures of the St. Croix near where I live. One was taken in March, and one was taken in July. Um, Things look pretty different depending on where on that seasonal clock you are. And for individual organisms, for instance, this robin, they also do things depending on a clock. So if we can open up the chat, um, what are some things that we see robins do only at specific times of year? And I can't see the chat. Maybe I can. There it is. Make a nest. Yes, great example. What else do we see them do? They do migrate. Yep, exactly. And what else do they put in that nest? Eggs. Yeah. Yeah, so depending on the time of year, you might be able to see robins. Around here we do have robins year round, but um, they generally aren't singing, and there are only a couple of them. Um, in spring and summer we have a bunch of them. So depending on what time of year, you may see robins, you might not. Um, in the spring, you'll hear them singing a lot. That is how they find mates and how they like keep other robins away from what they consider their territory. Uh, and yes, after they do a lot of their singing and they find mates and stuff, they'll make a nest, they'll lay eggs. Those eggs will eventually hatch, and you'll have these tiny baby birds. They'll spend some time feeding them, and then the chicks go out of the nest, which they call fledging. And so during some times of year, you can find these little tiny robins that have full feathers and everything, but they can't fly yet, um, just kind of skittering around on the ground. And the parents are still around, they're still feeding them, but it takes a day or two for them to be able to actually start flying after they leave the nest. Um, so then for a little while, you'll see robins getting fed by their parents, and then eventually they become independent. So all of that is part of a robin's yearly clock, yearly calendar. And let's see, same question, but what about a plant? Do plants have calendars? They sure do. Uh, yes, they do. So this plant here, this is called a bloodroot. It gets its name because if you pick the flower, the sap that is left behind, like on your finger, if you touch the base of the stem, is kind of this orangey red color. So it's called a bloodroot, and they bloom right about now, in early spring. You get to go out and see them. So plants also have a calendar. There are times of year where they bloom, there are times of year where they have leaves, they don't have leaves, and all of those are part of nature's calendar or nature's clock as well. Now, the thing about nature's clock is that it isn't very reliable. For instance, not every year on what day is today? April 25th at 10:41 a.m. do the bloodroots bloom. They don't bloom on a strict clock the way that we think of clocks or calendars. The nature's clock is more dependent on the weather. Um, so some years we might see bloodroots blooming in early or mid-April. Some years we might not see them blooming until May. So nature's clock isn't quite as consistent as ours, and that's where looking at all of these seasonal events and writing them down can come in really useful. Because then you can say, oh, this year the bloodroot were blooming in April, and last year they were blooming in March. Last year we had that super early spring where it was very warm very early. And by writing all of these down, you can start to see patterns, but we'll get more into that later on. So, we're going to take a second to just look at this picture. And I'm guessing you can probably tell what time of year this picture was taken, but start thinking about the evidence. What what do you see in this picture that tells you what season it might be? I'm just going to give you 30 seconds or so to look at this and think about the evidence for the season. Another 10 seconds or so. All right. So, a lot of different evidence here. Some of the things that I looked at, um, I've put numbers here. So, you have these baby ducks. You only see baby ducks during, generally summertime, maybe late spring. We have all of these green cattails coming up out of the water. In fall and winter, they would be, brown and not as verdant green. Um, we have open water on the lake. Um, in winter, that would be ice. You also have the dock that is in the water. A lot of folks take their docks out in winter so they don't get frozen in. And then you see on the water surface here, there's some seaweed, aquatic vegetation that's had the time to make it all the way up to the surface. And you generally don't see that until quite late spring or early summer. So I would say this is probably late spring, early summer. And all of these notes are phenology. Um, they all measure that seasonal clock. So here's another example, and we'll do another 30 seconds here. Um, what season is it, and how do you know? And we'll do another 10 seconds. Okay. So when I looked at this picture, here's what I came up with. There are these huge flocks of migrating birds coming into and out of this wetland. You have all these leaves down here that are changing color. They only do that in fall. Um, the vegetation or the plants that are growing out of this wetland have they're all brown. They aren't green anymore. But there is still open water. It's not frozen over. And I definitely don't see any docks out on this lake. So we don't see evidence of docks, but there might have been in another season. Okay. Um, so before we move on, do we have any questions about what phenology is? And Katrina, if you don't mind telling me questions from the chat, because I can't see them.
I will help out where I can.
Thank you. I will try not to get distracted by the woodpecker out my window.
I don't see anything right now, but feel free to keep
Okay.
going. And oh,
Sounds great.
actually, I have one.
Mm, okay.
We had a school who joined late. Could you go over what phenology is again?
Absolutely. So phenology is how we study nature's calendar. So the things that happen in different seasons. That can be related to weather. So when does your local lake or river um, have ice? And when does that ice melt? When do you see your first snow? It could be related to plants. So what time of year does your sugar maple start producing sap? Or when does it have leaves? When does it flower? Trees do flower, a lot of them. Um, and it could also has to do with animals. So for animals, their clocks also kind of follow a similar pattern where instead of growing leaves and then dropping them. Instead, they're growing maybe their winter coat or they are going underground, in the case of like a chipmunk, for winter. And then they also have seasonal reproductive cycles. So when are they having babies? When do those babies leave the nest or the den? When are they independent? When do the adults start their courtship behaviors? All of those things would be phenology. I'm happy to go into a longer description if you'd like. Okay. Hearing no other questions, I'll keep going. Um, oh, there it goes. And so we get to study phenology in the classroom and on the radio. This is my work associate, John Latimer, there with the white shirt. He has been studying phenology for 40 years. Um, he started out as a rural mail carrier, a postman. And so he would drive over 100 miles a day dropping off people's mail. And he started just um, making a record of every time that he saw, say, a butterfly or a robin or a red-winged blackbird. He started noting down those seasonal events as he drove. He had a little tape recorder, audio recording device, and so he'd just make notes as he drove. And now, 43 years later, he has this incredible data set that he was invited to Harvard to share that data set because it is so rare to have these 40 years of data of when things are happening in nature. And he doesn't have any specific biological training. He went to college for engineering, but he just got interested in this. It became a passion of his. And he has this incredible data set. He started sharing what he was seeing on the radio, the place where I work for. And he also started getting invited into classrooms to teach students how to look around at nature and make observations and keep an eye on that seasonal calendar. And so here he is last year with the St. Croix Preparatory Academy. And in this picture, he is talking about how ants, um, you know how ants can bite you? They have a little, they can use formic acid in their bite to make it sting extra. That formic acid is also the same thing that makes lemons, although lemons are citric acid, but that acid is what makes lemons sour. And so one of the things John likes to do to horrify students is to eat an ant because they do taste sour. Um, so that's what he is doing here. What a guy. So why study phenology in schools? I think because it's fun is a good example. Um, so here I am with a group of students. One of them had just found oh, I'm going to forget the species of spider, but I just found a spider. I Spiders are the one flaw in my general biology braveness. I I am scared of spiders. And so on this day with these students, I decided to get over my fear and hold a spider, and it all went okay. Um, but it's really fun to study phenology, and it's really fun to get outside with your friends, with your teachers, and go look at nature. And it's educational. There are a lot of different curriculum standards that can be met through studying phenology, whether it's math or science. If you're making reports, you also are looking at writing and English. If you're recording reports, you've got public speaking. You can cover a lot of curriculum ground through phenology. And because it's fun, it's also a better way to learn. And we've got 40 years of data showing that this is a pretty successful way to engage students and yeah, to learn about the world around us. So here, the left two pictures are of Maggie Anderson. The leftmost one is her as a kid. She was one of our student phenologists growing up. And the center picture here is her as an adult. She is now studying phenology I think she's graduated graduate school now, but she's made a career out of it. And then on the right, there's my old guy, John Latimer, for his 40th anniversary at the radio station. And we were not expecting the turnout that we got for his 40th anniversary party, but we had more people show up than we could fit into the room, who have been listening to John Latimer's reports and finding them valuable. So I would argue that studying phenology in schools is pretty successful. A lot of these folks, their favorite part of the week is the student reports on Tuesday mornings. So why on the radio? Just kind of talked about it. First of all, the only reason it's on the radio is because this one guy decided that he wanted to write these things down and decided he was excited enough about it to share it with others. So this is all thanks to John Latimer. Um, as he said, he's just a guy who likes nature. And because he decided to bring this to the radio, we have this entire group of people who have learned, care about the environment, and are more active in enjoying it, appreciating it, and protecting it. So, how does phenology on the radio work? How do we get from students to the radio. John and I do workshops throughout the state of Minnesota. So there he is in blue, and I am the raspberry-shaped human over here, meeting with teachers and getting them feeling prepared to take their classes outside. Here is our network of schools as it is right now. There is also one way over in Massachusetts that sends us reports. Um, but yeah, we've got this great network. And the fun thing about having schools throughout the state is that you get to see or hear the seasons move through the state just in our little phenology talkback segment. So what people are seeing in the South at Prairie Creek Community School right now is they're seeing daffodils bloom already. The people at Lake of the Woods School up north, or Great Expectations, are just starting to see their first red-winged blackbirds. And so you can kind of see spring move north through this lens of all of our students reporting what they're seeing in their area. Um, so if you want to study phenology, it's pretty simple. Whether you do that with us or just on your own, it's a great thing to do. The steps are pretty simple. Go outside, find a spot that you want to keep an eye on, and visit it often. While you're there, look around. What's changed since the last time you visited? Um, Another priority is just enjoy yourself. A lot of the phenology observations that I find are just because I'm running around for fun. And while I'm running around for fun, I see, hey, there's that wildflower. Um, but in all of this, we want the priority to be that you're enjoying yourself, you're engaged, and you get to be outside. Now, the vital step for phenology is this last one, that you write it down. So once you've gone outside, you've visited your spot, you've seen what's changed, now you need to be sure you write it down. If you don't write it down, then unfortunately you haven't quite taken that last step to do phenology. So always write down the date and the location. Once you have that record, then you can compare it to last year's or 3 months ago, and you're starting to really map out what nature's calendar looks like for you in your region. Um, and bonus step, if you want to join us on the radio, make an audio recording, and then we can learn about it with you. Uh, and I'll get into the specifics there later on. So when I'm going outside and I'm doing my phenology walk, I really take all of my observations and I put them into 4 buckets. I think of them in 4 categories. So one of them is, okay, what are the plants doing right now? Do they have leaves? Do they have flowers? If they have flowers, are they being pollinated right now, or are they kind of done flowering and are they starting to like put out seeds? For animals, I might keep an eye on the birds. Are they singing their like courtship songs? Do they have nests? Do I see any little baby robins scuttering around in the grass? I look at weather, so I always write down the temperature and the weather conditions. If I'm looking along the St. Croix River, I'll also write down whether it's flooding or not. And then I find the last bucket to be one of my favorites is the extras. So if you saw something that isn't necessarily phenology but is really, really cool, I put that in that bucket. Some of our classes up north live in areas where there are wolves, and wolves, of course, hunt year round. But one student, while he was waiting for the bus, got to see a wolf chase a deer across the road, run further on, and then he heard the wolf catch the deer while he was waiting for the bus. Now, because that doesn't really have to do with nature's calendar, it isn't technically phenology. They do that year round, but boy, is it cool, and boy, do I want to hear about it. Um, okay, we're gonna skip over this bit. So here we're gonna have another practice session. So we have these deer in this forest. So let's think a little bit about how we know the season and what we might write down that is phenology about this picture. So I'm going to give another 30 seconds or so, um, just for a little more practice. Alrighty. So here's what I might write down if I went outside and I saw this scene. So it was on March 6th, 2019. There's the date. Here's the location at Fort Snelling State Park. It was sunny and 32 degrees out. And while I was out there, I saw deer with their winter coats. Now, this is a interesting part here where just seeing a white-tailed deer wouldn't really be considered phenology. We have white-tailed deer here year-round, so you can see them year-round. But what you don't see year-round is deer with those thick winter coats. So by adding that detail, I've now made it phenology. There's deep snow on the ground, there aren't any leaves on those trees, and as an extra, hey, guess what? We got to make a snowman. So this would be a lovely little phenology report right there. And if you need help knowing what to look for at a particular time of year, uh, that's what I'm here to help with. We have a lot of different resources, so you can always listen to John's. So, in addition to the student phenology reports, John also does a report of his own, and that comes out on because we're outside of the listening area for Northern Community Radio. You can listen to those on the website or through a podcast. I write every week a season watch newsletter that has a curated list of what to look for that week. There's also a digital library that I've put together that I'm happy to email out to anyone who's interested. Our partners at the University of Minnesota have put together a season watch website, which I'm hoping to show to you later on if we have time, that has a lot of really cool stuff. Plus, a lot of John's data lives there on the Season Watch website. So you can see graphs of, for instance, when sandhill cranes arrive. Um, so that's pretty cool. And there are a lot of other resources as well. Nature's Notebook, iNaturalist, Project Budburst, all of those are places where you can take a look and get ideas for what to look for. Um, so where do you record all of these things? Remember, I said recording what you saw is important. Um, if you just want to do this on your own, you can make a little journal or get a calendar and write down your observations in there. You could record them in a spreadsheet. Um, I have a little big old sheet of plywood that is kind of near where I do my phenology walk. And so that I remember to write things down, I just write it down on that piece of plywood every time I come back from my walk. And every once in a while, I take a picture and I make it digital. And another option is if you like to write letters or texts or whatever to people, that's another good way to record it. My parents are very adorable and have written my brothers and I uh, letters basically every week since we started going off to college. And looking back on those letters in the lens of phonology, I could go back to those letters and tell you exactly what was going on in this area just from like, oh, we got to see a bloodroot today. So it's unofficial, but boy, does it work. If you want to share what you're seeing, there are a lot of different apps where you can share what you see. Nature's Notebook is a phenology-based app. Journey North, iNaturalist, eBird, and then this long acronym stands for something. They do weather stuff. I don't really remember exactly what the acronym is, but they measure rainfall and temperature, stuff like that. And of course, phenology with KAXE. We always love having more schools. So please get in touch with me if you want to join. So to send a phenology report to us, it's pretty simple. Once you've gone outside, you would come inside, write out your script with all of your observations. You can record the report on just a cell phone. Email me the audio, and if you wait for a little bit, um, John responds to those reports on Tuesday mornings at 6:45, and then they get posted to our website and to the podcast on Wednesday at noon. And then you get to listen and enjoy. Um, John Latimer will give his feedback on what you're seeing and kind of put it in context of what he's noticed and what's going on throughout the state. Did we have a question? I saw a pop up.
Nope. I was just letting you know that CocoRa's is the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network.
Thank you. Man, I can never remember all those ones. Thank you. So if you're interested, you can check us out. The website is kaxe.org/phenology, or you can send me an email at cmitchell@kaxe.org. Um, and with that, uh, thank you, John Latimer, all of our teachers and students who send us these reports, the radio station, and of course our funders, the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, and all of you. And I will open it up for questions.
I'll pop on for this. It's always easier
Thank
answering
you.
questions to another face. Awesome. Well, do you have a favorite type of phenology that you like to look at and watch?
Oh, it, I will admit, when I first started, I was kind of a grumbly about it because I wanted to be doing what I was doing in grad school and like go out and hold turtles and put up traps and
Hmm.
all of that stuff. And I was kind of like, oh, this will be fine until I find another job that lets me do that again. Um, and what I've discovered is that by studying phenology, it's kind of like if you're searching for something in your junk drawer or like a closet that you never go into, and you're like digging through to find something, you end up finding five other things that you had forgotten existed but are really cool. Um, and by going out and looking for stuff every week, I end up finding a lot more. And so it's made me a much better biologist. I see a lot more, I recognize a lot more species. I'm just paying closer attention. And it's also like just being outside more means you have the opportunity to see some really cool stuff. So thanks to studying phenology, I like watched the squirrel use a branch of a spruce tree basically as a jungle gym where it would like hop over, land on it, go underneath the branch, and then like and it would skitter upside down back to the base of the tree, run up, hop over, and just keep doing it again. And that's something I wouldn't have found if I wasn't out for my phenology walk. Um, my favorite parts of phenology? I mean, I love an animal. Probably watching the animals.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's made me tune in more to the birds and see migration a little bit more. Oh, nope, I'm gonna change my answer. I don't like winter. Winter is
Hmm.
cold. It makes me be inside more, and I'm a naturally chilly person. Um, and I think I always thought that like winter in Minnesota lasted from basically late October until April. That was my winter. And because I'm now more tuned in to that seasonal clock, I start seeing signs of spring as early as January when the chickadees start singing their like Phoebe or cheeseburger call. And so that has given me months more enjoyable time outside,
Hmm.
which has been great.
Wow. I noticed that a lot of your schools are Minnesotan schools. I know that
Hmm.
we have a fair chunk of Wisconsin schools here. Is that something that your program would be interested in?
Come on over. We'd love to have you. Yep.
Awesome. Well, I'm
Yep.
not
Since we're
getting
funded
any.
through,
Oh, go
okay.
ahead.
Since we're funded through the Minnesota Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, we'd only do workshops and stuff in Minnesota.
Mm.
But we would the wider our network, the more context we have for how seasons are moving. So we would love to have folks from Wisconsin anywhere else.
Yeah, awesome. Is it something they can do just looking out their classroom window, or do they have to go anywhere for it?
Um, you could do it just by looking out your classroom window or having students record what they're seeing at home.
Mm,
Um, it will be far more rewarding if you're able to go outside for an hour once a week.
yeah, yeah, awesome. Okay, well, I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but I have one more. You kind of talked about how you got to where you are, but I know
Mhm.
we have a lot of students listening who are pretty interested in the biology kind of realm. Do
Mhm.
you have like one piece of advice or recommendation for anyone who wants to get into biology or maybe even phenology?
Um, I'd have to go with a lesson that was difficult for me to learn because I'm stubborn. In that I spent a long time thinking that learning species identification was boring
Mhm,
because it's essentially flashcard. See plant, name plant. See bird, name bird. Um, and I was always very gung ho that the point was to feel connected with nature, and you don't need to know everything's name to feel connected to nature.
mhm.
Um, I didn't want to watch my bird feeder and like be doing flashcards the whole time. I wanted to watch the bird feeder and see what the birds were doing. What I have found is that learning some species names allows you to see so much more of what's going on. Um, where because I can now tell the difference between a goldfinch, a winter goldfinch, and a pine siskin, I've noticed these really interesting different behaviors that they have.
Mhm.
And I can now, like, this time of year, they're molting between their, like, kind of brown, tan winter colors and their bright yellow summer colors. And I get to, like, watch, because I know to look on the right bird, I get to see
Mhm.
that first yellow feather pop out. And then they have this really silly middle stage where they're like yellow in chunks and brown in chunks. Um, and that stuff I just wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't learned some species. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Hmm.
How do ducks survive in the winter?
They get on out of here. Yep. They either some ducks will find some urban spaces that have one of those pumps to keep the ice from forming, and they can
Mm.
hang out there. Most ducks migrate south, and then we get to see them again in spring.
Yeah, so if you're seeing ducks, good chance it's not winter.
Yep.
It's good to
Yep.
know.
Or someone's doing something artificial to keep the water open for them to hang
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Well, that is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your program and all of your knowledge. We really appreciate it,
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
of course. I'd like to take the last couple of minutes just to thank all of you for joining us today for the 2025 St. Croix Youth Summit. Uh, these recordings should all be shared either today on Friday or next week early. And I'll share them out in email to everyone who registered for our event. And that includes you, Charlie. You'll get a recording too.
Yay. Thank you.
So I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you again, Charlie, for your time. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And I
Bye,
hope
friends.
everyone has a great weekend. Bye. Oh, hold on.
Hmm?
Ah, you got to thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.
You too. Bye bye.